I am not for a return to that definition of liberty under which for many years a free people were being gradually regimented into the service of a privileged few. I prefer that broader definition of liberty under which we are moving forward to greater freedom, to greater security for the average man than he has ever known before in the history of America.
Every great president in the history of the United States never was guaranteed victory for the outcome he wished, but his prospects for attaining it remained high because such presidents governed the nation, and that through existential crises, with a strong conviction of what the future must be. This past week for LaRouche activists and members of the policy committee continue to be defined by interventions against the present state of affairs with the weapon of the concept of the future. America at its present state is like a giant rod of iron, shaped but left idle to erode and rust. Iron, man could mold into tools of harvest and the planting of crops, to combine with other elements of the periodic table to fashion into steel to uphold our buildings for shelter, manufacturing, and generating electrical power. But rather, we've lived for the last 50 years leaving iron and the other resources of the planet to remain as they are because the gods told you to do so, and many followed out of fear. Now by iron, I mean how we could have mastered the promises of atomic science. And by the gods, I mean the secret government that assassinated John F. Kennedy in 1963, 50 years ago, and drove the nation to abandon its productive power and hand over America's sovereignty to the gangsters of Wall Street. With the tensions arising around the topic of quantitative easing, as its injections are driving hyperinflation of commodities, coupled with the financial crises of Western Europe, the trend of the last 50 years has reached the point that it can no longer exist, let alone be tolerated. But whether it remains to be prosperous or an extinction event is up to the leading thinkers in the United States to join the LaRouche PAC's initiative to revive the John F. Kennedy paradigm, committing the nation to an audacious plan, an international Manhattan Project to master thermonuclear fusion. This brings us to our first intervention of the week in New York City, Manhattan, for LaRouche PAC in action. Now, while Obama played the role of a mad Roman emperor at the United Nations General Assembly, LaRouche activists interjected into the discussion the thermonuclear peaceful perspective, distributing a statement by Buso Party chairwoman of Germany, Helga Zepp LaRouche, while there.
Well, we visited the UN this week twice, and we brought with us, we probably had about 10 people on each deployment, including the activists that came out. And the clear intention was on this Thursday deployment in particular to communicate the requirement for an international program for fusion energy, and that this is where the optimism must be brought to. Otherwise, it means nothing. This international change in mood that was very much reflected in the people that we met, but that we see in the agreements going back to the initial Kerry-Lavrov agreement on chemical weapons in Syria, and up to the resolution that was passed by the UN Security Council last night on the removal of the chemical weapons, as well, of course, the interchange between Obama and Rouhani. All of this was in the air the week when we were there. And on Thursday, we brought out with us Helga Zepp LaRouche's urgent appeal to the UN General Assembly, in which she communicates that this is the ultimate requirement for the future of mankind, an international system of nation states organized around the principle of the benefit of the other. So what we found ourselves in the midst of, what we brought out was a huge number of signs on Glass-Steagall, the trademark Hitler mustache on Obama. We had a large sign that got the most attention that was a series of beautiful photographs and images of where the world is going to go, assuming victory. In a victorious world, where will we be? And so in the middle we have an image of the World Land Bridge, and then around it we have images of fusion reactors, of agricultural development, of maglev technology, of the Bering Strait Tunnel. All of this we put right in the middle, and the idea was you walk into our zone, you're going to walk past this table, you're going to come into the Renaissance. And that was very effective in a way that was surprising even to us, I think. And the first day we were out there, we met people who were, for example, a Chinese nuclear expert who was advising the Chinese government on nuclear policy. And a simple, truthful statement like we need peaceful nuclear power and fusion, we don't need Obama, brought over many different diplomats from countries all across the world. Just a short list because there were far more people. We had people from Sudan, Somalia, France, Belgium, Syria, Haiti, Liberia, Brazil, many, many others, Slovenia. And what was expressed by the people who came in contact with us was a certain pride and excitement about the transformation within the international system, that you have a resistance that is building and becoming more effective. The first speech at the UN being by the Brazilian president, and what she conveyed in an attack on the NSA surveillance state and the international spying coming from the United States. So that provided the backdrop for it. And we got, I'd say, I'll bring it to this point. I think that what you could see is the principle that Lyndon LaRouche has been clear on recently, which is that you have a dangerous, criminally insane minority that are louder than everyone else. The vast majority of people, they want these things. They want this future. They want to be human. They want development. And yet there are people who we met at the UN who had no power of imagination to conceive of a world where this could come true. So it made very clear how necessary we are. A person who was affiliated with a Syrian opposition group came by, supposedly a Christian group, and he wanted to sign up to impeach Obama because Obama hadn't attacked Syria yet. So he signed up, and then we started talking to him and found out this was his take on things, and expressed to him what is a Westphalian principle, or as Pope Francis put it recently, only war comes from war. Peace must come from peace. And he would look askance, avoid eye contact when these profound concepts were presented to him, even though he was listening carefully to the threat of thermonuclear war that LaRouche has warned so gravely about. Even though he heard this, he refused to accept it. It didn't fit into his system of axioms. And so he had no means to leap above it, to soar beyond his own insanity. And as much as we fought, eventually he took his name back and ran away, but brought with him the nuclear Nawapa report. And immediately after he came up, there was a man from the Sudan who is currently an electrician in New York City. He moved to New York City because of the genocide in the Sudan. He was from Darfur, And as soon as we spoke and laid out the program, within the first 2 or 3 sentences, he said, "What can I do for you? What can I give you? I don't have much, but I'll give you what I can." And he signed up and became a member. And he said, "Anything for peace. We can do this. Anything to make this happen." So I think that presents a certain picture of the kind of scenario that you have there right now. And it was punctuated when later in the day we had set up in front of a building, really just because of the physical layout and because it was near the UN. Turned out that Bolivian President Evo Morales was speaking and it was doing an interview in the building. And when he came out the door and he saw us on the fight with a huge image of Obama shaking the hand of Saudi king, he gave us a huge thumbs up. He nodded his head emphatically, and he drove away. And I later found out that in the interview he was giving, he was attacking Obama's imperialist war, that the very thing that he had laid out, that Obama laid out on Tuesday, when we were there prior in the week. So the environment is such that the representatives of all these various countries have a certain brightness in their eyes. And it was in that context that we got out hundreds, 700, 800 copies of Helga LaRouche's appeal, and that we recruited many different people from all around the world, people who could grasp in a certain moment of clarity historically that what they're dealing with is a genocide policy, that the operation that Obama is representative of is empire, and that we form a resistance.
With this backdrop, the intervention into the United States also remained intense. On Capitol Hill, Washington, D.C., members of Congress were greeted with the message, "Shut down Wall Street, not the government, restore Glass-Steagall."
So we're here in Washington, D.C., witnessing the insanity of a government that faces shutdown, when in reality the only thing they should be thinking about shutting down is Wall Street. And Glass-Steagall is firmly on the table. Wall Street is more bankrupt than ever. And the issue of shutting down Wall Street, the issue of what comes in afterwards in terms of a real economy. And I don't just mean some jobs. I mean a fusion driver program, which is the only way mankind is going to survive at this moment. But that perspective is now on the table from what the science research team with LaRouche PAC has done with the recent Nuclear Nawapa 21 pamphlet, but even more so with what just occurred now with the Chinese proposal from the president of China, Xi Jinping, at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, where he put the issue of the Silk Road squarely on the table. Now, that Silk Road policy of rail and energy and cooperation in the region and Southeast Asia, as he's describing it now, won't happen without a fusion program. So this is now the moment to push this through. And I can just say that the announcement by President Xi Jinping of China on the Silk Road concept has caught people off guard here in Washington. Various think tanks are scrambling to sort of put their cynical edge on things, that this is just China expanding its sphere of influence, when in reality we should see this as an invitation to bring the nations of Asia, Russia, China in particular, together around a new Pacific orientation, a Pacific alliance of the nations of the Pacific Rim. And that is what we're putting on the table with the Advanced Science Driver program around fusion, which is getting a wide open response right now.
For those not familiar, Glass-Steagall is an essential step to achieve a thermonuclear economy, because the power of finance would be taken away from the parasitical groups of Wall Street, and force the government into a position where the idea of finance has to be entirely shifted along the lines of how John F. Kennedy, among others, thought.
Yeah, I think what I'd like to add to that is just thinking about, at this period, what the legacy of President John F. Kennedy represents in that direction, with that intention for the empowerment of mankind around great projects. And we're going into the 50th anniversary of John F. Kennedy, 50th anniversary of the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And what we should be looking at right now is what Kennedy represented as a person, what he represented in terms of his policies to defeat the British Empire, to destroy the secret government and the apparatus who did not want to see this type of progress that Dave was just speaking of move forward. And I just went to an event where an author, James Reston Jr., of a new book called The JFK and as the victim of an assassination, the accidental victim. And basically, without getting into the details, the book is expressing the idea that John F. Kennedy wasn't the person who was targeted for assassination, it was John Connally. And when I went to this event, I mean, this should have just had the stomachs of everyone in that room drop. It should have appalled everyone. And after I intervened on the author and said that what he actually presented was a disgrace, was a complete dishonor of President Kennedy and what he truly represented, what the vision was of Kennedy for the nation. And this is what's happened. People sit back and they look at this and they accept it. And they're conditioned. This is why we have to destroy the secret government, destroy Wall Street, destroy what J. Edgar Hoover represented. It was appalling to see that what Kennedy represented, people are spitting on his legacy and saying, well, you know, really wasn't Kennedy that was the target. It was something else. And people, you know, may find this completely appalling, and you should. Because if we're going to actually be successful in bringing forth the vision and the motion toward progress that every single American citizen should be demanding right now, we have to look at who John F. Kennedy was, what he represented, who his enemies were, and why they wanted him killed.
Kennedy's legacy for reshaping the present world was also brought into the discussion during a conference hosted by Washington, D.C.'s Center for Strategic and International Studies. After opening presentations by panelists on the topic of U.S.-India relations, Diane Sayer, member of the Policy Committee, interjected with the broader issue of U.S.-Asian relations in general, and that proper policy could be effected if there was an internal shift in U.S. policy rather than focusing on the problem of other countries.
You have a conception of the future and not squabbling over what seem to be diminishing returns in an era where we're just printing money but not really producing anything. So my question is, would a shift of the United States in the direction of what Kennedy had envisioned, great projects, advancement in nuclear power, create the basis for a really productive relationship?
Thank you. Great work on this.
Yeah, I think the energy area is an area where there's real hope. Let's take civil nuclear, which Rick and I and some other people in this room worked on for a number of years. It's stuck, and it's stuck on the liability issue. It should not be beyond the mind of mortal man to be able to come up with insurance ways in which to cut that Gordian knot and move forward. And if we do that, then the programs we have in train, particularly whether it be in thorium, whether it be in next generation nuclear, can move forward because there will be an economic incentive. There will be a road to glory, if you will, in that regard. And this goes into other facets of energy. The situation has entirely changed in the United States in regard to gas. We were gas poor, now we're gas rich. The Indians want gas. We want to sell it to them. We're going sort of in a case-by-case method, but we could be able to do that. The point is, there are these areas, particularly in energy, which can be brought together. And once you have that kind of interchange going, then you have mechanism and leverage in order to be able to address in negotiations how, as a practical matter, you come to agreement. I mean, it's not any secret that the economic interests are going to drive this. Well, the idea is to create more economic interest, so you have a framework in which you can resolve the problems which otherwise you just get hung up on and you can't see beyond.
Now, what will get the broader American public to fight for this nuclear perspective? Thermonuclear technology has been known for decades. It is strictly political that confinement of nuclear fusion has not been achieved. A simple review of the funding levels reveals the case, as actual funding past the 1980s remained below the level of what projects in fusion were receiving in 1978. Not only below, but continuously dropping. Not only was the fusion project virtually abandoned, but what came in its stead? Inflation. Since the attacks of September 11, 2001, the path for hyperinflation was triggered. LaRouchePAC is currently pulling together documentation of the basic comparisons of key materials then till now. You take the hikes in gas prices from 2001 to 2013, for example, and the increases are of near 180%, where in 2001, gas per gallon was on average $1.50. In 2013, $3.64. That is, to fill your medium-sized vehicle, say it held a 14-gallon tank, cost you $20 in 2001. Today, it costs you $50 to fill. How does that feel on your paycheck? That is how Wall Street has been screwing you. This document will be available soon and will be deployed immediately as of this coming Monday. However, to reverse this egregious economic injustice is not simply a matter of demanding to pay less. It is a matter of changing our notion and commitment to a different economy, one based on physics and free from the religious dogma that money defines value. Be on the lookout for that document on hyperinflation, and be sure to check out materials on LaRouchePAC.com released by the LaRouchePAC science team on the matters of fusion. Study it and deploy it to your networks and keep engaged with our activities. If you would like to know what you could do to play a role in waging this fight for a new America or wish to contribute, dial the 1-800 number that is before you on the screen. Don't hesitate. Get involved.